So the South China Morning Post, which is a Hong Kong newspaper, has been quoting sources as saying that President Xi Jinping plans to meet with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin as well as Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, possibly on Friday, as a goodwill gesture for the trade talks. So Mnuchin and Lighthizer are here. They're preparing for discussions tomorrow as well as on Friday with the Chinese Vice Premier Liu He. Today, Secretary Mnuchin had told reporters outside of his hotel that he was encouraged and hopeful that the conversations would be productive. So the Wall Street Journal has been reporting that the talks are probably going to focus on a draft of an agreement that could be later signed by President Trump and President Xi at a later date. It's still unclear, though, whether or not the two sides have been able to narrow their differences. Today, though, the markets rallied, and that was on news that President Trump was open to the idea of extending the March 1st deadline. And from the Chinese perspective, an extended deadline would be wonderful for them because it would mean that they would be able to continue to keep the conversation going, though the argument within the American business community would likely be that the talking would continue, but perhaps without a whole lot of action. Guys?
Yeah, it's a fine line, I guess. It's not a hard deadline. It was made up. And Becky was mentioning that, like George W. Bush, President Trump is the decider. He can decide. I mean, he can change that, right? I mean, there's nothing set in stone about March 1st if you're getting close to a deal.
If you feel like there's nothing set in, right? There's nothing set in stone about a deadline, and it would make sense when you consider that there is a lot on the table. These are very complex issues, so that would make sense if Washington feels that enough is being done for the two sides to strike a deal. However, President Trump himself had said that he didn't want to get into these long, protracted discussions that his predecessors had gotten into previously. And from a Chinese perspective, the Chinese have had a history of trying to, well, some people would call it a delaying tactic, but actually getting into conversations, keeping the conversation going, and then hoping that something breaks their way. So really the trap, I think, and the danger is that the Trump administration could get into the same situation that it's been criticizing its predecessors for.
Although I would anticipate, at least, given what this administration has already done, that even if they move that deadline, they're not saying infinitely, okay, we can continue these talks for forever. My guess would be that there would be a limit to the patience, and it would be based on the idea that progress is being made, things are actually changing. That's just my guess based on what they've already done to this point.
Yeah, that would be, but I think that another danger is that you still keep that level of uncertainty going in the markets, because you could always say that, okay, well, we're not going to hit you with tariffs right now, but if you haven't made enough progress, then we'll hit you with tariffs in 6 months.
Although
and the problem is that it's difficult to say, how do you measure the progress for, say, IP theft?
Right.
You know,
especially when the Chinese say they aren't doing
that?
any IP theft to begin with. If you're not admitting that any of these things are happening, how do you say you're changing the practice? The one thing that most people we've talked to who I think really understand the situation do say that this uncertainty in the market's going to be there no matter what happens. Even if there is a deal that's reached, there would be something like making sure the protocols that you can check it and verify to make sure these things are actually happening, that uncertainty is going to be around for quite some time to come.